Hey guys, it's Vandiazzo, back at it again with another feature card buddy fight deck profile. This time we're doing another video on the Chaos Autodeity army, but this is my new upgraded version of it that is consistent and works pretty well. So I hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to the Patreon. So let's get started. So as you guys know, Autodeity army is from the Chaos. I don't know why you build a Dragon World version of it unless you're really high, but if you guys don't remember what the Chaos Flag does, it's your total size becomes 99. You can use Chaos monsters from any world, and aka this one's basically pretty much Dragon World and Gear God. And all size 30 or greater monsters on your field cannot be destroyed, and their abilities cannot be nullified by your opponent's card effects. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And your initial hand cards becomes 4, which kind of sucks, but it can help. My buddy is still Proto Deleter Gear God version .088. 60,000 power, 6,000 defense, critical of 3. Put any number of monsters on your field into this thing's soul and pay 3 gauge. I never call it like that. I call it without soul. Because I can. And then, when this card enters the field, you may call a size 3 or less monster, chaos monster from your drop zone without paying its call cost, and overkill the once per turn ability. Discard a card from your hand at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase. Destroy all your monsters, and you gain life equal to it, and it has chaos territory, which means you can have a total size of 4, soul guard, and it's a size 90. That is, the overkill ability is helpful. It basically means you're cutting down your opponent's attacks most likely, and you gain life off it. It's pretty nice. So, on to our actual cards in the deck. 2 copies of Flame Dragon Mech Chaos Linear. 6k power, 5k defense, critical of 2. All the cards are, by the way, are size 3, so I'm not even going to say their size. At the end of the battle this card, regardless if it attacked or if it was attacked, if you have another Autodeity army on your field, your item, a set spell, a monster, anything really, you may return this card to your hand. Easy. Say you had 0 hand cards, you had Gear God and like a full field out. After this thing's attack, you go bounce it back to hand during my turn, and then when your turn comes around, overkill it, discard it. I win, basically. That's helpful. It replenishes Gear God, and it does its job. 2 copies. 2 copies of Chaos Chibi Panda. 6k power, 6k defense, critical of 2. If another Autodeity army on your field be destroyed, you may put this card from your field into your drop zone. If you do, that card remains on the field. Helpful. It basically prevents your monsters from dying as long as it's an Autodeity army. There are cards in this deck that are important. That helps. Really nice. Let's see. 2 copies of Twin Swords, Mex Chaos, and Dorochi. 6k power, 6k defense, critical of 2. When this card enters the field, if you have another Autodeity army in your field, you may choose one of the following 2. Either gain 2 life, or for this turn, this card gets plus 2 crit. So you can either gain more life for a defensive reason, or you can ram this thing into your opponent for 4. That's helpful. Either way, it doesn't matter. Sometimes, depending on my opponent, I'll adjust it. If I'm playing a multi-attack deck, I will gain the 2 life, and I'll most likely have Gear God. If I'm playing a deck that is defensive, I'll go for the extra crit to push them. Let's see. 4 copies of Forging Mech Chaos Rectangle. 7k power, 4k defense, critical of 2. Pay a gauge. When this card enters the field, put up to 1 Autodeity army item from your deck into your hand. Shuffle your deck. Then if you have no items equipped, equip the item by paying its equip cost. So, that's helpful. Searches out for the item and gets you resources. Now, when I was playing through this deck, I was having trouble whether I should cut this guy down to 2 or this one down to 2. But I decided to keep this one at 4. Because when I changed the ratios with this one, it seemed like I was getting my item less and less, so I had to swap it to 4. Let's see, 4 copies of Bombard Mech Chaos Cylinder, 7k power, 4k defense, critical of 2. Pay a gauge. When this card enters the field, if you have another Autodeity army in your field, blow up a monster on the opponent's field. Then when it attacks, if you have 4 life or less, it gets double attack for the turn. That's helpful. It gets more attacks out and on place. If you have another part of the archetype on the field, you blow up another monster. So that's helpful. It can do resource gain, and it's really nice. 4 copies of Chaos Fanning. Military device with Chaos Fanning. 6k power, 4k defense, critical of 3. Pay a gauge, to call it. During your turn, all Autodeity armies on your field cannot be rested, returned to the hand, and their abilities cannot be nullified by your opponent's card effects. So they can't touch this with a card effect, they can't rest your cards, and they can't bounce them during your turn. which is helpful. That basically means your opponent can't really touch you besides nullifying the attacks and destroying them by effects. 4 copies of Misfiring Mech Chaos Globes. This is an all-around 4 copies regardless of the situation because of its first ability. But just to get on its stats, 9k power, 1k defense, critical of 1. Very powerful, strongest out of all of them. When another Autodeity army monster on your field enters the field, put the top card of your deck into your gauge. Once per turn effect. This deck has a huge gauge problem. So normally what I do is I call globes, charge something. I go draw, charge, and draw. Charge an Autodeity army. Pay 3 gauge. Buddy, after calling globes, buddy call Gear God. Bring that Autodeity army back. Skill globes. I charge a gauge, and then I can do stuff. I've gone games where I've gone globes, rectangle, Gear God, item. So I've gotten like a full field out basically for free. And then finally, 4 copies of... Oh yeah, and then its second ability, after it destroys a monster with an attack, destroy another monster on the opponent's field. So 2 guys in 1 stone. 4 copies of my buddy. That's obvious. Now on to our spell lineup. We have 2 copies of Population Reduction. Works as a null, even though it's not. Put a size 3 monster from your field into the drop zone and pay 1 life. Counter, draw 2 cards. Helpful, your opponent's attacking your center, you could go, I cast Population Reduction. Destroy my center so you can't touch it by paying 1 life, and then I draw 2 cards. And if that card had Penetrate that was attacking, well, you probably just reduce the Penetrate by a lot. Unless its Penetrate was 1. But either way, you're reducing the Penetrate, and you can just draw 2. Nice. 2 copies of One Who Comes from Havoc. You may only cast a card if you have 2 more Chaos on your field. Pay a gauge, draw 2. You can only use once per turn. Helpful, gets hand resources. The hand thing with the Chaos does restrict it, so obviously I need to run some draw spells. These are the draw spells. They help get hand, and they help basically get back on your feet. 2 copies of Chaotic Pain, the card that deals with the gauge problem. And kind of gets cost for Gear God, I guess. Pay a life, you mill 3, and then you gain 3 gauge. Now, I don't want to run this at 4 because I don't want to eventually deck myself out because it's not once per turn. But that 3 gauge is really helpful. It helps with the gauge problem, and it fulfills Gear God's cost on its own, and it can get you more people to call with Gear God. So, really nice. 4 copies of Chaos Wall, Barrier of Havoc. You may only cast this card during an attack on the opponent's turn, and if you have 2 or more Chaos on your field. Counter, nullify the attack, and then you charge a gauge. Once more helpful with the gauge cost, and I run it at 4, so it's a cool null. 4 more copies of another card that acts as a null, but isn't a null, and also works with Cylinder's spam ability, and Globe's ability. Chaos Signal. You may only cast this card when a monster on your field is destroyed during your opponent's turn. Counter, call up to 1 Autodeity army monster from your deck by paying its call cost and shuffle your deck. Now say your center was like, say your center was Cylinder, and you had globes on your field, and your opponent killed the Cylinder, and you had this in your hand. You could go, cast Chaos Signal, get out another Cylinder from my deck, skill of globes, charge a gauge, skill of Cylinder, blow up a monster. Basically, you fuck over your opponent, and you get resources, so really nice. I've actually had games where I've done that, and it's fun to do it. It acts as like 2 nulls in 1, because you have to kill your center, and they just lost a monster, so 2 people down with 1 stone. 2 copies of Chaos Absorber. 2k power, 1 crit, pay a gauge to equip it. You may rest this card if you do charge a gauge. It's not there for the attacking, it's just there for you to charge a gauge since this deck, once more, does have gauge problems. And then the second effect, Counteract. Put this card from your field into the drop zone. If you do, nullify the penetrate of all cards on your opponent's field for this turn, which is helpful because that means you kind of can't be touched by penetrate of the cards currently on the field, if I'm understanding that correctly, which can help if your opponent is like multi-attacking with penetrate. You can just defend yourself with that, or King Nagito, who fucks you over really easily. 4 copies of Autodeity Armor Chaos Finger, 5k power, 1 crit, pay a gauge and a life to equip it. This card can attack any if you have a monster in the center, and when it attacks, if you have another Autodeity army on your field, for this turn, this card gets double attack. So, more attacks out of it. Cylinder, more attacks most likely. Chaos Globes, more attacks. You get the point. Just more attacks, more attacks, more attacks. And then finally, our Impact. 4 copies of Deity, Lance, Chaos, X, Tempest, Buster! So, what it does is, if you guys don't remember, it's when you cast it, if your opponent has 5 life or less, and no monsters on the center, aka they don't have monsters on the center, and you've attacked 3 or more times this turn, pay 3 gauge, deal them 5 damage. This card cannot be nullified, the damage cannot be reduced, and if your opponent's life becomes 0 from this, they cannot revive from it, aka it's unrevivable. So, helpful. 4 copies, always. Just doing it, doesn't matter. So, that was the deck. This deck is consistent, aggressive, and defensive all at the same time, so I'd say it's pretty much passed my test. So, I hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to the Patreon. And I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to raise your flag. Can you pull a buddy rare card?